Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook Live. I am Bryson Carver. We've got a great show for you guys today. More Justin Fields criticism that is totally out of line, insane as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to get into that in just a second. Also, Charles Barkley with another big opinion. I got to give Charles a lot of credit. He gives us a lot of topics on this show, gives a lot of people topics on their shows as well because he's got big opinions, and he's got one big opinion about the Clippers that I absolutely 100% agree with. I'll get to that later on in the show. Also, LeBron James is on the mend. He's getting better. He's on the way. What does that mean for the Lakers and their title opportunities and their title chances? I'll get into that later. Also, the Lakers play the Nets tomorrow in a primetime ABC matchup. I'll discuss the opportunity that we may have to get a Lakers versus Nets finals, which I think all NBA fans really want at this point. But let's start with Justin Fields. I led the show off with Justin Fields yesterday. And kind of just discussing the hypocrisy, if you will, behind the criticism of Justin Fields. And you hear it all the time. I'm going to cut to the chase, kind of get into what I was talking about yesterday, is we see it year in and year out. And I got to give Stephen A. Smith a lot of credit because I saw on his show on ESPN Plus, Stephen A.'s World, he was talking about the exact same thing I was talking about yesterday, is that when you have black quarterbacks, they seem to get a certain criticism that their white counterparts don't get. For example, you had Baker Mayfield in 2018. Baker's got off the field issues. He's grabbing his crotch against Kansas, making inappropriate gestures. He's arrogant. He's cocky, and he's talented, of course. And he gets taken number 1 overall. Okay. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, no off the field history. Not saying Lamar Jackson was the player that Baker was in college, but keep in mind, both guys won the Heisman Trophy. Lamar Jackson, people are saying, oh, he needs to switch to receiver. He's not a quarterback. He's a receiver. Okay. Lamar's taken at the end of the first round and 2 years later wins the MVP unanimously. And by the way, I heard he couldn't throw. He threw for over 30 touchdowns, I think he threw 36 touchdowns his MVP season and had another good season last year. So he can throw. Then you see in 2019, you saw it with Kyler Murray, who was going to go number 1 in the draft and did go number 1 in the draft, deserved to go number 1 in the draft. He was the best quarterback that came out of that class. But you heard the discussions like, oh, is Lamar Jackson, or excuse me, not Lamar Jackson, is Kyler Murray, I hear he's not that good of a leader. He's not all about football the way you would want him to be, and his teammates in Arizona couldn't speak higher of him. So they seem to like him a lot. And now we're seeing it with Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields going into this past college football season in 2020, a season that the Big Ten wasn't even supposed to have. And he had a lot to do with the fact that the Big Ten even did have a season. I'll get into that as we go. But going into 2020, the 2020 college football season, we kind of all knew at the time, we thought we knew, these are going to be the first 2 quarterbacks selected. Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent. He's going number 1. Justin Fields in most drafts would go number 1. Those will be the first 2 off the board. And then you see the rise of Zach Wilson. It's like, okay, yeah, this Zach Wilson kid, hey, he can play. But then you start seeing Trey Lance better than Justin Fields. I'm like, I really like Trey Lance. I do. But I don't know. I don't know if he's, keep in mind, Justin Fields was the number 1 overall quarterback coming out of his high school class. Had to transfer from Georgia, which I have no idea why that was the case. Jake Fromm is not even close to the talent that Justin Fields is, but Kirby Smart likes Jake Fromm more than Justin Fields. Not quite sure why, but okay. So Fields transfers to Ohio State and puts up unbelievable numbers. And then we see Mac Jones over Justin Fields. And you know what's funny? And again, I don't even want to say I've been hard on Mac Jones. I think I've been totally fair with Mac Jones, and that I don't think he's a guy who's going to succeed in the NFL at the quarterback position because he's unathletic in a league where mobility is huge among quarterbacks. You say, what about Tom Brady? As I always say on this show, what's my nickname for Tom Brady outside of greatest quarterback of all time? My other nickname for Tom Brady is the great outlier. He 44-year-olds should not be playing quarterback at this high of a level and absolutely should not be winning Super Bowls. And his style of play should not be working in the NFL, but it does because he's great. He's Tom Brady. Outside of that, pocket quarterbacks just don't succeed the way they used to. Jared Goff, the Rams were like, yeah, we can do better. We'll go get Matthew Stafford. Oh, okay. And I feel bad for Jared Goff because I think he's in a world of trouble in Detroit. I think it's going to be bad at best. I think they're a 3-win team, but that's another story for another day. The point is, in a league with mobile quarterbacks, Mac Jones does not fit that mold at all. In a league with quarterbacks with unbelievable arm talent, he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the kind of spin, the kind of zip on the ball that Mahomes does, or Russell Wilson, or Aaron Rodgers. Heck, Tom Brady, 43, almost going to be 44 years old at the start of next season. Tom Brady has that. That other guy's had. Kyler Murray has. He doesn't have that. Accuracy, please. His receivers in Alabama were open by 10 to 15 yards every single pass. And even on the deep balls where there's a safety and coverage, those balls would be underthrown and the receivers would have to make plays on it. Don't believe me? Look at the tape. Look at the Mickens catch against Tennessee. Look at the Waddle catch against Ole Miss. The deep balls in coverage, in tight man-to-man coverage, are underthrown. Look at the tape. So, and still, a lot of people believe, and I even read a report, I reacted to a report yesterday, that Mac Jones, bam, he's going number 3 overall to San Francisco. Now, of course, we got to see if that's true. We're 3 weeks away from the draft. But the fact that people actually think that Mac is better than Justin is ridiculous. Now, I've had my doubts about Justin Fields. My biggest doubt has been consistency. It has had nothing to do with, I've heard some scouts use the age-old, racist term. Oh, I don't know if he can process information the way you would want a franchise quarterback to do. Oh, boy. How many times do we have to hear that old tape? That, the black quarterback can't process information. What evidence on earth do you have to support that? You don't. I can't remember what scout it was. I think he was with ESPN or the NFL Network said that. You had Dan Orlovsky saying, I've heard that he doesn't have the work ethic. He's not all about football. He's the last guy in, first guy out. Justin Fields, if I might remind everybody, was the same quarterback who knew good and well. You had pundits on television, on radio saying, Justin Fields, don't play this year. It's a pandemic year. You've got nothing to win and everything to lose. You could get hurt. You could, have a bad season. You have we've seen players in the past. I remember a running back at Stanford 3 or 4 years ago. I think his name was Bryce Love. He had a great junior season. People are like, hey, you need to come out. And he stayed at Stanford and had a bad year, and it hurt his draft stock and cost him a lot of money. So he took that risk, and it did not pay off. It hurt him in the end. And so people are saying the same for Justin Fields, like, hey, play this thing safe. Just sit back, train with NFL, with NFL quarterback coaches, like Jordan Palmer, right? Carson Palmer's brother, who's a great quarterback trainer, or Tom House, who trains guys like Matt Ryan, Dak Prescott, Tom Brady. He trained Drew Brees. Like, just hang around those guys, prepare for the NFL. Don't play college football. You got to play this thing safe. And knowing he was going to be the 2nd overall pick in the draft the year after, what did Justin Fields do when the Big Ten scrapped their 2020 season? He said, no, we're playing. We are having a college football season. If the ACC gets a season, the SEC, the Big 12, eventually the Pac-12, Big Ten's getting a college football season, and he was the main athlete out of all the football players in that conference to say, we're having a season. So don't tell me he doesn't care about football. Okay, that stuff, I'm not going to lie, guys, it ticks me off. When he had everything to lose and nothing to gain. And yet he still said, I want to play. I want us to have a season. It's ridiculous, this unbelievable. And then you had Ryan Day, the head coach of Ohio State, come out and say, this is ridiculous. And who knows Justin Fields better than his head coach for the last 2 years? Ryan Day. It would be different if you had a coach come out like the head coach of a quarterback. We saw Urban Meyer 2 years ago. Like, I loved Dwayne Haskins coming out of Ohio State. I thought the Giants were on drugs for drafting Daniel Jones over Dwayne Haskins. While Daniel Jones has been up and down, he has proven to be a slightly better prospect than Dwayne Haskins, who's had off the field issues, commitment issues. But we heard it should have been a red flag, but I didn't. I ignored it because I liked him. But we should have listened to Urban Meyer, who coached the man. Urban Meyer said back in 2019, I don't think he's ready for the NFL. That should have been a red flag. Ryan Day is not saying that about Justin Fields. He's saying this criticism is out of pocket. It's ridiculous. And it's yet another instance of a black quarterback being unfairly criticized. Oh, he can't process information. Oh, he can't, he needs to change positions, or he doesn't have the work ethic you'd really want a franchise quarterback to have. Please tell me, scouts, if you want to criticize his consistency, if you want to criticize accuracy, mechanics, have at it. But what evidence do you have for the three that I just mentioned before that? What evidence do you have of that? It should be noted, by the way, that Mac Jones, as a freshman, got a DUI. So Mac Jones does have a history of off-the-field stuff. Justin Fields does not. And yet, Mac Jones is the next Joe Montana, according to Jim Mora Jr., the son of course, the head coach Jim Mora. And Justin Fields is going to be a bust, and he's going to be the next Dwayne Haskins, and it's just going to be, a mess in the NFL. Okay. Yeah, I just don't get it. Lamar Jackson needs to change positions. Kyler Murray isn't a leader. Justin Fields isn't committed to football. Warren Moon can't process information. I mean, when is it going to stop? When is this nonsense, this BS going to stop? I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's just, I don't know, man. Like, it goes back to what we've talked about on this show many times. Is, man, compare everybody the same. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent. I think, I have 3 home runs that coming out of this draft that I think are going to be outstanding in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, Penei Sewell. I think all 3 are going to be great players in the NFL, maybe with future Hall of Fame careers. Okay, outside of that, we don't know, right? But if Justin Fields goes to San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan, that offensive talent with George Kittle and the kid they drafted out of Arizona State last year, I'm trying to remember the kid's name, Brandon Ayuk, electric player, great running game. Trent Williams as his left tackle, great offensive line, a great defense when healthy. Hey, Justin Fields can do some special things. But they like Mac Jones more, who never trailed at Alabama because he was obviously with the best team, the best roster, the best coach, by the way, of all time. And had the advantage over every single team he played with the lead, played with the best receivers in America, the best offensive line in America, one of the best running backs in America, the best defense in America. I mean, it's at some point you got to say, man, could we see this guy face a little bit of adversity? Even just not Justin Herbert, even Joe Burrow, who I didn't love coming out of LSU last year. At least you could say, hey, he was in some tight ball games, and man, he made some big plays. He made big throws. He had some scramble plays against Alabama that were huge. In that game where it was back and forth between he and Tua, it was an unbelievable game. He made the big plays at the end to win the game. So we saw, okay, he's got the clutch gene. We haven't seen that with Mac Jones because he was never in the position to have to have the clutch gene because the roster was that. And by the way, the SEC was down last year. I thought the SEC was going to have a great year. Outside of Bama, Florida, it was kind of a wash. I mean, even Georgia took a step back. Auburn was not near as good as we thought. A&M was good, but they got clobbered by Alabama. People are like, oh, A&M needs to be in the playoff. Well, whether they make it or not, it doesn't matter. They're going to get clobbered by Alabama. How do I know? Second week of the season, they lost by 4 touchdowns. So, it just kind of goes to the fact that it's Bama and everybody else. And so that's why I can't take Mac Jones seriously. And Justin Fields, one of the most talented quarterbacks coming out. At worst case scenario, he's the 3rd best quarterback. Like, I like Zach Wilson. I just don't think he'll work in the New York Jets organization because I discussed it on Monday. It's not like they have a history of developing great quarterbacks. Their best quarterback, Joe Namath, has a career-losing record. So they don't have a history of developing great quarterback talent. Even when the quarterbacks do have talent, Chad Pennington, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith, Mark Sanchez, they're just not good at this thing. They don't specialize in quarterback development. That's why I have questions about Zach Wilson. Think he's talented. Some people have called him the Mormon Mahomes. So I don't know. Is he going to be Patrick Mahomes? That's a high bar to have to reach. But the fact that Justin Fields on a lot of people's boards is the 5th best quarterback. What? Okay, so every board is going to start with Trevor Lawrence. I totally agree with it. There's no debate. He's the best quarterback. You can have a debate between Fields and Zach Wilson. As if we're talking about talent, I'll give Zach Wilson a slight edge. Justin Fields is no lower than 3rd. Trey Lance, who I like, by the way, is not better than Justin Fields. And Mac Jones, dang sure ain't better than Justin Fields. So this nonsense, that's what it is. It's nonsense. It's got to stop. And we, again, like I said, whether you like it or not, we all know what it comes down to. We all know what this criticism is all about. It's the fact that historically, we have scouting reports on black quarterbacks that say, "Oh, he can't process information." What evidence do you have to prove that? What evidence do you have outside of the fact that you're just, it tells me a lot about you and not as much about the quarterback and more about the scout. So it's ridiculous that the Justin Fields criticism. It's insane. So by the way, sad day today. We lost 2 very well-known people. Prince Charles. I woke up this morning and saw the news. Prince Charles passed away at the age of 99 years old. So of course, condolences to the royal family, to the Queen. Lived a full life. So may he rest in peace, and certainly we wish the royal family the very best. And then you see the devastating news that the rapper DMX passed away earlier today at the age of 50. A week ago on Friday, he had a heart attack. Of course, he was on life support for the last week, and then earlier this morning he went to be with the Lord. So just tragic news. 50 years old is far too young to lose such a great icon in the rap and hip hop culture and the rap and hip hop world. And it was just so weird because last Friday morning I was working out, and back to back, I listen to Pandora when I work out. That's just me. But back to back DMX songs came on, and it was like, okay, this is great. This is great workout music. Like DMX, you want to get a good cardio workout in. Hey, DMX is your guy to listen to. And then later that day, you see he has a heart attack. It's like, wait, wow, I was just listening to him earlier today. Like, what's going on? And so just tragic news. This is still kind of hard to process. It's hard to believe. So thoughts and prayers go out to DMX's family and his loved ones. It's a tragic loss for all of us, for all of us that listened to him, that knew what the man was about. And he's in a better place now. So is Prince Charles, and so we wish both men who passed away. We wish both families and loved ones the absolute best. So let's shift to Charles Barkley. Now, here's what I love about Charles Barkley. First of all, he says stuff that I'm like, I don't know what the heck this guy's talking about. And then he says some stuff. I'm like, bam, Chuck, spot on. That's what I love about Charles Barkley is, and to me, those are the best television hosts, radio hosts in general, is the ones where on one hand, you completely disagree with them. On the other hand, you're like, you're spot on. I absolutely with you. Those are the best people. Those are the guys and the women that get the ratings. Those are the men and women that's like, hey, that's why they're successful. So Chuck said something in this instance that I'm like, I totally agree with this. So Charles Barkley, inside the NBA, the show that Chuck is on, Shaq, Ernie, Kenny, it's the best pre, half, and post game show in sports. The only one that I think rivals it is the NFL and Fox. They're excellent. But Charles Barkley was talking about the Clippers, and they put a tweet up there on the board saying Charles Barkley really said the Clippers weren't contenders, and it's got a lot of the laughing emojis. And Chuck said in response, the guy who tweeted this, Manuel, he's got a bee emoji, like the little bee that'll sting you. It's just I don't know. This is Twitter account. And Chuck's response, he says, I've been poor, I've been rich, I've been fat, I've been skinny, I've been old, I've been in the Hall of Fame. And the one thing I can always tell you, the Clippers have always sucked. Sorry, Clippers Nation. I know this is, you don't want to hear this, and listen, it's not like Clippers Nation is that big. I mean, we all know LA's a Lakers town. We all know that. And, this is coming from somebody, myself, I was all on that Clippers bandwagon last year. Not as a Clippers fan, I'm a Warriors fan, so I prefer the Lakers and Clippers didn't win a championship. I'd be good with that because they're our division rivals. But last year, I'm like, oh, come on, the Clippers, they're deep. They got Kawhi and Paul George, and Doc Rivers is one of the best coaches in the league, and you got Jerry West running the organization everywhere he goes. Everything he touches turns to gold. He's the best executive in NBA history. Like, this is going to win the championship. And they blew a 3-1 lead in the second round. And at that point, I'm like, I'm selling my stock on the Clippers. I'm done with the Clippers. I don't even want to. The day after they lost Game 7, I didn't even want to say the word Clippers. I didn't want to say their dang name. And so I'm like, I don't care. They got the talent. I don't care. The Clippers are just one of those franchises. It's almost like the Dallas Cowboys. It don't matter how much talent they got. Lob City. A few years later, Kawhi, Paul George, Lou Williams. I wouldn't put Patrick Beverley in that group, but okay, you can put Patrick Beverley if you so choose. It don't matter how much talent they got. Somehow they will find a way to screw it up. It's what they do. So it's what they do. Really, there's a lot of franchises that you could sum up pretty quickly. Like, there's some with complicated history, like the Spurs. They had good players, George Gervin, the Iceman, and then they weren't championship contenders. But then they got David Robinson, who was a great player, but they still really weren't in championship contention. And then they got Tim Duncan, and they won 5 championships in the next 16 years or 15, 16 years, whatever it was. They got, of course, they hired Pop, or Pop hired himself, actually, as the new head coach, and he's been there ever since. And then they get Tim Duncan, and of course, Tony Parker comes along, Manu Ginobili, and they win 5 championships. Like, there's some where it's like, okay, it's up and down, up and down. That's normally the case with most NBA franchises. It's like the Chicago Bulls. Terrible. They were called we learned in The Last Dance that the Chicago Bulls pre-Michael Jordan were known as the traveling cocaine circus. So not exactly known for winning basketball games. So the Bulls, you could sum up their history in this. Pre-Jordan, they were the traveling cocaine circus. With Jordan, he quickly turned into the best player in the league and eventually the greatest player ever. And then 6 of the last 8 years of Jordan's career, 6 titles. 6-0 in the finals, 6 finals MVPs. And he, of course, they won those 6 titles with, they added Phil Jackson, of course, and Scottie Pippen, the whole bit. They added Rodman during the second three-peat. So, and then since Jordan, there was a Derrick Rose years, but outside of that, they were pretty much never a championship contender, or they haven't been a contender since. But when it comes to the Clippers, you can sum up their history pretty quickly. The Donald Sterling years, of course, one of the worst owners in NBA history, the former disgraced owner Donald Sterling, before about 2011, 2012, before the Chris Paul trade, almost a decade ago. I can't believe it's been that long ago. But until about 2011, 2012, the Clippers just flat out sucked. As Charles Barkley said himself, they were the laughingstock of the league. They were a joke. They every single year, number one pick, and they never hit on a number one pick, ever. And so then they trade for Chris Paul. And we all know where Chris Paul goes, bring some W's with you, because, man, he's one of the ultimate winners in the league. And it's weird to say that about a guy who's never won a ring, who's only been to one conference finals in his career. But you look at everywhere where Chris Paul goes, they always win. And you get Chris Paul, and of course, they took Blake Griffin first overall a few years before that, and DeAndre Jordan. And, of course, they had the good bench with J.J. Redick and Paul Pierce, who, of course, was in the news for some other things earlier this week. But, we don't have time to get into that. You had Big Baby Davis. You had Austin Rivers. Like, you had some players on that team. Jamal Crawford. Matt Barnes. Like, that was a deep Clippers team. Doc Rivers is the head coach. It's like, hey, this is a title team. And when the Clippers didn't suck, which they did not suck, Lob City, they got to the playoffs every year. They did not suck. When they didn't suck, they blew leads. Of course, we all know they blew that series against Oklahoma City back in 2014. 2015, they play The Houston Rockets in the conference semifinals, they got a 3-1 lead. They lose game 5. Okay, no worries. We got game 6 in our home court. We'll close them out, and we're going to meet the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. And in game 6, they got a 20-point lead, 20-plus point lead. And Houston, without James Harden, ends the game on like some kind of crazy run, and Houston ends up winning by double digits. So they're down 20, and they win by 10. I mean, it was something crazy. And then, of course, the Clippers lost game 7, thus completing the 3-1 choke. 2016, completely outplayed by the Portland Trailblazers in losing 6 games. 2017, they lose in the first round again to the Utah Jazz. And at that point, Lob City split. Chris Paul got traded to Houston. Blake Griffin eventually got traded at midseason to Detroit. And then a year after, DeAndre Jordan said, I'm out, left to go join the Dallas Mavericks. And that was the end of Lob City. But 2 years later, they take the fully loaded Warriors with Kevin Durant, 6 games in the first round. And we're all thinking after that series, like, they took the Warriors 6 games. Steph and Kevin Durant and Draymond and Klay Thompson and Iguodala. It's like, whoa, they're a couple superstars away from being a championship team. Look, I mean, they didn't have an all-star, and they still took the Clippers 6 games, or the Warriors 6 games. And what do? They add the superstar in Kawhi Leonard and the star Paul George. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a title team. Golden State's hurt. Lakers, I worry about if LeBron and Anthony Davis can get the adequate help they need. Plus, I didn't trust Frank Vogel as a head coach. Utah, come on. At the time, Portland, I don't know. They not a championship team. Denver, a little too young. Not quite yet. And we get to the bubble, and the Clippers have a 3-1 lead on the Denver Nuggets. And in Game 5, they blow a 15-point lead and lose Game 5. No worries, though. It's a bad game. It's a fluke. You would have liked to close out the series, but you didn't. Close them out in Game 6. Game 6, they had a 19-point lead, and they lost that game too. And in Game 7, the decisive Game 7, they had a 12-point lead and lost the game and the series. So my response to anybody that likes the Clippers this year, where's Charles Barkley lying in this instance? Because I kind of got a new saying. When the Clippers don't suck, they choke. Look at their history. The team has never, forget NBA finals. They've never been to a conference finals. We make fun of the Cowboys for having not gone to even an NFC championship game, much less a Super Bowl, in the last quarter century. At least they got 5 Lombardis before that. Clippers in their history have never made it to a conference finals. Not one time. They have never won 2 straight playoff series in their history. Think about that. Never won 2 straight playoff series, which of course gets you to, in their case, the Western Conference Finals. I mean, heck, I get it with LeBron. It was with LeBron James. Cleveland went to multiple Eastern Conference Finals. The Cleveland Cavaliers. Heck, the Cavs were close. If had it not been for the shot by Michael Jordan, early in, I think it was, what was that year, 1990? I can't remember the exact year it was. Of course, the iconic Jordan buzzer beater to defeat the Cavs in that 5th indecisive game. And it was, they were at least close to it. Clippers, nah. They haven't sniffed the conference finals. And when they have, 2015, 2020, they've choked. Call it what it is. They choked. They had a 3-1 lead. You got to win the series if you're up 3-1. No excuses. And so, no, I don't trust the Clippers. Are they contenders? All depends on the health of the Lakers. I'm going to get to the Lakers in just a second here. It all depends on the health of the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm going to get to LeBron in just a second. It looks like LeBron is very much on the mend and is very much on the way back. Anthony Davis could come back before LeBron, but I don't know if he should. What I'm hearing about the Achilles it's more serious than we thought. Keep in mind, AD has not played since February 14th. So it's April 9th now, and Anthony Davis has still not played and has not even been in the cards for playing. Like, there hasn't even been those games where, well, AD's questionable, he may play, and then he's a late scratch, right? No, he hasn't even practiced yet. He hasn't even practiced. So he's still quite a ways off. And so this is the AD injury, I'd actually be more concerned with AD than I would with LeBron, because we all know LeBron is as good as anybody in the history of sports, maybe the best of anybody in sports as far as staying healthy and bouncing back quickly from major injuries. So this is something the Lakers need to be concerned about, but I'll get into that later. If the Lakers are healthy, I actually think the Clippers have a better overall team. But they'll find a way to choke. We all know. There's those franchises out there. A lot of Cleveland sports franchises are kind of in this group. Atlanta, sorry, Atlanta fans. The Braves blew a 3-1 lead to the Dodgers, and the Falcons are known for blowing leads, most notably, of course, that Super Bowl, that infamous Super Bowl against the New England Patriots with a 28-3 lead. They're not exactly known for closing the deal. There's those franchises like that. The Clippers are in that group where you're like, I know they're better on paper. I know they've got a better record. I know I probably, my head says, got to give the Clippers the little edge, right? They play more together than the Lakers have, but then you got to say, you know what? They'll find a way to screw it up. They'll just find a way. I don't know how. We just got to see how it plays out. It's not if they will lose, it's how they will choke. I will say that again. It is not how they will lose, or if they will lose, it is how they will choke. That is the Los Angeles Clippers in a nutshell. So are they the second best team in the West? Yeah, they probably are. I would be, if Denver beats them again, then that'd be something. I don't know if Denver is still quite ready to beat the Clippers, because if we go into that series, if we get a second round between the Clippers and the Nuggets, it'll be like, the Clippers will come in, they'll be ticked off from last year, and they'll do what they got to do against Denver, probably winning 6 games. But against the Lakers, LeBron's been there before. Anthony Davis, he's now been there before, right? I mean, you've got the Montrezl Harrell went from the Clippers to the Lakers. Like, that stuff matters. And so, no, I don't think the Clippers are contenders. Same thing I thought about the Milwaukee Bucks last year. Everybody's talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. Oh, they're the best team out east. They're a lock to get to the finals. Toronto can't beat them. Boston can't beat them. Miami can't beat them. And I said, hold up. No. They are an average team who has an outstanding player in Giannis. They're an average team with an average coach with an unbelievable player who is the only reason that they're the number 1 seed in the East last season. And of course, the Bucks went out in 5 games in the second round to the Miami Heat. So I'm saying the same thing about the Clippers. I don't trust them. I'm not going to fall into the same trap that I did last year. I'm not going to do that. You got to learn from your mistakes. And I'm going to learn from my mistake on this one. The Clippers are not contenders. So let's go to the Lakers. Let's go to LeBron James. Now, LeBron on Instagram yesterday posted a picture of he and Anthony Davis sitting on the scores table, cheering for their teammates. They're both got their mask on. LeBron's got a Los Angeles Dodgers hat on his head with a bunch of LA pins in it. And they're sitting on the scores table, and LeBron says, "The weatherman says the weather is changing soon, and it predicts a thunderstorm is coming. Folks, prepare and take the proper caution measures to stay safe." So I think we all can read that as LeBron's coming back pretty soon. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I obviously don't know the current state of LeBron's ankle. But judging by that picture there, he doesn't have an ankle brace on, which we saw just a week ago. He took that picture with his daughter Zuri in the gym of his house. He took that picture in front of the mirror, and he had a big boot on his ankle. He doesn't have that anymore, so that's a good sign for the Lakers. Is LeBron trying to rush back? I sure hope not, because you don't mess with ankle injuries. But I think he's a guy who knows his body. Matter of fact, I know he's a guy who knows his body. He spends millions a year taking care of it, and it's part of the reason why in year 18 he's still in the MVP race, or at least was until he got hurt, like still playing in an elite level. I'll say this about LeBron, and this is my biggest concern for the Lakers, is if they get into a series with, say, a team like Denver, if they get into a series with a team like, dare I say, Phoenix. Hey, Chris Paul almost beat the Rockets last year with OKC with a bunch of kids. Now he's got Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and Jay Crowder can make big shots. And Monty Williams is one of the most underrated coaches in basketball as far as I'm concerned. Like, if they get into one of these, I still think the Lakers are going to come out of the West. Don't get me wrong. I think the Lakers are going to come out of the West. But I'm just saying, as far as concerns, it's the same thing. It's kind of the same issue we saw with the Clippers last year. They didn't play enough together. Now, in the Clippers instance, it wasn't injuries. It was load management. It was Kawhi, the days Kawhi didn't play, Paul George did. The days Paul George didn't play, Kawhi did. Like, they never played together. The whole team never built any chemistry. And to those that say chemistry doesn't matter, okay, you look at the Miami Heat last year, not the most talented team, but they played as a team and got to the NBA Finals and took the Lakers 6 games with multiple stars hurt. So that's where team chemistry does matter. Shaq and Kobe, in my mind, the greatest duo of all time. Most unstoppable duo ever. The Detroit Pistons did not beat the Lakers. The Lakers beat themselves. No disrespect to that Detroit team led by Chauncey Billups and guys, I'm trying to remember his name. I can't. I'm trying to remember the great defensive player for the Pistons. I can't remember him at this moment in time. But the point is that Pistons team did not beat the Lakers. Kobe and Shaq, because at that point their relationship was unsalvageable. They could not stand. They wouldn't speak to each other. Like, it was that bad. They beat themselves. So team chemistry does matter, people. And LeBron and AD haven't played that many games together. I don't think they played a game together since February, since Valentine's Day. And again, today's April 9th. It's been a while. So by the time, I think LeBron might have an opportunity to come back before AD comes back, which I didn't think was ever in the cards once LeBron went down. I figured AD would come back, and then 2-3 weeks later, here comes LeBron. They try and win some more games, gain a higher seed in the West, and then the playoffs start. But it's looking like LeBron's going to be back before AD does. And of course, we all know AD has a much more extensive injury history than LeBron, and AD's been in the league almost a decade, less than LeBron. And so some guys just get hurt more than others. And that's the case with Anthony Davis. But the point is, I worry that by the time both come back, by the time the Lakers get their injury issues solved and sorted out, will they be able to build that momentum going into the playoffs? Because keep in mind, LeBron, for the great athlete he is, for the way he takes care of his body, just like anybody, he will have to get back into basketball shape. So he will probably be on a minutes restriction once he comes back for at least a week. The next 3 games or so, once he comes back. Because you don't want to rush him out there playing 40 minutes and then he's just exhausted and maybe could suffer a soft tissue injury. Like, he's got to get back in the flow of things, as any NBA player, as any athlete in general would have to. And so once those two come back, are they able to build that team chemistry that other teams have, that the Phoenix Suns have, that the Utah Jazz, I hate to say it, but the Utah Jazz have? I don't think either of those teams will beat the Lakers. I don't. But could we see a situation where, and this is a good segue into my final topic of the show, could we see a situation where LA beats Phoenix, Utah, Clippers, Denver, Portland, whoever they face? They beat those teams, but it's a hard, grueling 6 games, and in some cases, maybe 7-game series, to where LeBron and AD are just carrying the Lakers, especially LeBron. And then by the time they get to the finals and play the Nets, and the Nets, we all assume, will just blow through the East. Nets will be rested. Nets will be, less injuries. KD's back. Kyrie's healthy. Harden will be back next week. Like, you got to consider all these things. I don't think these are out of the realm of possibility. And by the way, you talk about the Nets. We all talk about it's KD, Kyrie, Harden, right? Though obviously that's the big 3. They're 3 best players. And then people go straight to Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge. Both were great additions. However, people don't talk enough about Joe Harris, who's shooting darn near 50% from 3, which is outstanding. You got Nick Claxton. You've got Bruce Brown. You've got Landry Shamet. You've got these guys coming off the bench that give them good minutes. So, I sit here. Heck, DeAndre Jordan's still on the team. He can play. He can give you, he can give you a block shot a night, maybe. Some rebounds, some good defense down low. So, if we do get a Lakers-Nets finals, and this is the good, like I said, I mentioned the good segue into my final topic. The Lakers and Nets play tomorrow night in Brooklyn. It is it's the ABC primetime matchup, 8:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Pacific on ABC, Lakers-Nets, and what we all anticipate will be a finals preview. Unfortunately, we won't see the fully loaded Lakers versus the fully loaded Nets. Of course, Harden's going to be out on Saturday. He's out for at least another week with a hamstring issue, but KD's back. Kyrie is balling right now. Look at his numbers. He dropped 40 the other night against the Knicks. He played outstanding against the Pelicans the other night. And so, KD, first game back, didn't miss a shot. So he looks right in the rhythm of things. And of course, LeBron and AD will both be out on Saturday, tomorrow night. And so the question is, what are the chances we get a Lakers-Nets NBA Finals? And I just kind of detailed it with the Lakers. The Lakers' path, let's just say they land at the 4 seed. Let's say they land at the 4 seed. In that case, they will likely match up against Portland. Now, I like Portland a lot. Damian Lillard in my book is third. Heck, check that. He's second for MVP. He's second for MVP behind Giannis. I don't care if anybody says Giannis is the front runner for MVP. I love Jokic. Denver's not winning as much as Portland, or at least in recent games. Dame has been on a roll. So you got Damian Lillard. Of course, you got CJ McCollum, who's been outstanding since he came back from injury. Melo's having a great year. You got Enes Kanter. If Yusuf Nurkic could stay healthy, that would help. You've got guys like Norman Powell, who I thought was a great pickup at the trade deadline from Toronto. So that's a deep basketball team, and Terry Stotts is one of the better coaches in the NBA, top 10 coach. So they will give the Lakers problems. I would obviously take the Lakers, but probably in 5 or 6 games. Like the Lakers, Dame will give them problems. Portland's a great offensive team, not a great defensive team. So that would be the ultimate deciding factor in that series. So then they would advance, likely take on the number 1 seed, which we all assume will be the Utah Jazz. Utah's a deep team. Of course, obviously Donovan Mitchell's their best player. I've said it for about a year now. I think they need to trade Rudy Gobert. As great of a shot blocker, as great of a rim protector as he is, he and Donovan Mitchell do not work well together. They don't work well. So trade Gobert, see if you can get another star player with Donovan Mitchell, who's turning into a superstar. Look at what he did in the playoffs last year against Denver. He put up incredible numbers. So Utah could give the Lakers issues. I would obviously take the Lakers, but in 5 or 6 games. That home court in Utah, we're seeing fans are coming back in the arenas. That home court in Utah is a factor. And so then we get to the conference finals, where they would likely take on either the Nuggets or the Clippers. And of course, I talk about the Clippers. They'll find a way to screw it up. But for that, they will find a way to screw it up. They will give the Lakers issues. Make no mistake about it. This series would go 7 games in my view, and then the Lakers would just run away with Game 7. LeBron would be clutch down the stretch. The Clippers, pandemic P, would not. And the end result would be the end result, and the Lakers would advance to the NBA Finals. But by that point, you look at the Brooklyn Nets, you look at where they are in the standings. They're a half game back of the 76ers. I think ultimately they will jump the 76ers for that number 1 seed. But once you get James Harden back, they'll play some games together before the Lakers are able to play multiple games together as a full healthy unit, we assume, unless there are any future injuries, which of course we don't wish upon anybody. But you look at the Nets are actually a half game ahead of the 76ers, so they are the number 1 seed today. I think when it's all said and done, they will be the number 1 seed overall. So in the first round, they would likely take on a team like Boston or the Knicks or the Pacers. If the Bulls maybe get on some kind of run with Zach LaVine, who's having a great year, maybe they match up against the Bulls. Sweep. They would sweep any of those teams. Boston would probably get a game just off pure talent, just out of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. They would take that series at least to a gentleman's sweep, as opposed to 4-0, good night, clean out your lockers quickly. But the Nets would have no problem with the Knicks, with the Celtics, or with Indiana if they were to get into the playoffs. Then by the time we get to the second round, they play a team like Charlotte or Atlanta or Miami. Now, Miami is a team that I'm like, okay, don't bet against Jimmy Butler. Don't bet against Eric Spoelstra and that young team they have over there with Bam and Tyler Hero, with Duncan Robinson. Victor Oladipo was a great pickup at the trade deadline. Miami would give the Nets issues, major issues. Now, if they were to lock up and play a Charlotte or an Atlanta, that's a sweep. Atlanta is not a great defensive team. Charlotte does not have enough big name players. LaMelo's out. They do not have the perimeter defenders to take Kevin Durant, James Harden, or Kyrie Irving. They don't. And so by that point, we assume worst case scenario that the Nets will have lost 2 games in the playoffs going into the conference finals, where I believe they would take on Philadelphia. Now, of course, Joel Embiid is having an MVP caliber season. He came back from injury and hasn't missed a beat. He's obviously had the best season of his career. Ben Simmons has played great. He arguably played better once Embiid went down. I don't know if those two necessarily work together. Doc Rivers, Doc Rivers might be my coach of the year. They're a deep team in Philadelphia, but I think that would go 6 games. I would take the Nets to win. Philly's a great defensive team, but they cannot score at that team in Brooklyn. All 3 starters, or all 3 star players for the Nets, are capable of dropping 40 points. Heck, 50 points. KD's career high is 54. James Harden is, I think, 61, and Kyrie's is 57. So all 3 guys on any given night could drop 50. So that's all I'm saying. So by that point, we're getting the finals. If we get Lakers-Nets, if it goes the way I think it will, we got a Lakers-Nets NBA Finals 2021. This is for all the marbles. And at this point, the Lakers are more fatigued than the Nets, older than the Nets. Age does play factor, except for Mr. Benjamin Button, LeBron James. Outside of him, age, injuries, lack of team chemistry, all of that plays in, and now we take the Nets to win in 6 games. Maybe 7. LeBron might get it to a game 7. At that point, I'm taking the Nets to win. Again, they're a stacked basketball team. They've got the best player on earth, Kevin Durant. They've got the one of the best scorers at the point guard position in Kyrie Irving, who's really more of a shooting guard. James Harden is more the point guard. He's leading the league in assists. And James Harden, who's one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen. Then you got the bench and the role players. Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge, Nick Claxton, Joe Harris, Landry Shamet, Bruce Brown. Like, deep basketball team. Lakers really aren't. It's LeBron, AD, and then you got Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell. And then at that point, do you really... I liked the pickup of Drummond, don't get me wrong. Play big in the playoffs. No, I don't. Marc Gasol is old and will probably retire after this year. Wesley Matthews has been a big, I thought that would be a big pickup for the Lakers. It's been a big disappointment. And again, have we seen Coach Frank Vogel, in a situation where it's one of these tight playoff series and you've got to make a big adjustment? We haven't seen him in that situation. Are we sure? And we could say the same about Steve Nash, by the way. You could absolutely make the exact same case about Steve Nash, who up until this year had never coached forget an NBA game. He'd never coached a basketball game in his life. I mean, maybe he coached, his kids or something, but that's not on earth. And so I think all of that factors in. And like I said on yesterday's show, the Nets are the overwhelming favorites. They're not just the favorites; they're the overwhelming favorites. They're might be the greatest offense we've ever seen outside of Golden State. Once, when they had Steph, Clay, Draymond, Kevin Durant, Iguodala, Livingston, the whole bit. Greatest offense we've ever seen, arguably, and their defense is getting better as the season goes on. If they're average on defense, if they give up 100 points a game, they could score $130. They could score 130 points with ease. So that's what scares me, because if you are able to limit LeBron or Anthony Davis, which is easier said than done, but it is possible. If you're able to do so, who can you count on for the Lakers? Kuzma? You want Kyle Kuzma taking the big shots? Montrezl Harrell? I like Harrell a lot, but he's not a jump shooter. Wesley Matthews? Marc Gasol? Do you trust Andre Drummond to knock down a big free throw at the end of these big, tight, close playoff games? So all of that factors in. I do think we'll get a Lakers-Nets finals as I predicted before the year started. But unlike I predicted before the year started, because, of course, there was no James Harden on the Nets. I'm sorry, Lakers fans. Hey, if the Lakers, I will repeat what I've said for the last 2 weeks on this show. If LeBron wins this finals, if we get a fully loaded Lakers versus a fully loaded Nets team, and the Lakers win the finals and LeBron is LeBron, he's the greatest player of all time in my book. Because at that point on his resume, he would have beaten the fully loaded Spurs, he would have beaten the 73-9 Warriors, and the fully loaded Nets. Whoa. You know what I'm saying? By the way, before that, the OKC Thunder with Kevin Durant, who was at the time, even at that time, the second best player in basketball. Russell Westbrook, who at the time was the best point guard. Either he or Russell Westbrook, either he and Chris Paul in basketball. And James Harden, who was the sixth man of the year at the time. And the Eddie Baca, who had a career year. Like, he beat that Thunder team. He beat, of course, a good Miami team. Like, but those are the big three. At that point, LeBron would have 5 rings. He will have been to almost double the finals that Jordan went to. And he will have beaten the Spurs with Pop, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, the whole crew. The 73-9 Warriors after coming back from 3-1, and that still hurts my heart as a Warriors fan to this day, but he did it. And if he pulls this off, the Nets with KD, Kyrie, and Harden. He's the GOAT if he pulls this off. I mean, he is. And listen, I'm not going to be hard on LeBron James for having a 4-7 record in the finals if he loses, because I think he will. But if he wins, oh my goodness, that'd be the all-timer, man. That'd be the capper. That would say, Jordan, you didn't do that. You were great. You were all-time. You didn't do that in the finals. So that would be some kind of story. And I listen, because I know my Warriors are not in contention, this is the finals I want. This is the finals that every NBA fan wants who knows their team is not in contention. Once your team gets eliminated from the playoffs, this is the finals you want. Lakers, Nets, LeBron versus KD for the 4th time in the finals. They met in 2012, 2017, and 2018. We hope they will get back together again, once again in the finals in 2021. It would be one for the ages. So hopefully we get that. I believe we will. When it's all said and done, the Clippers will find a way to screw it up in the West, allowing the Lakers to get in. The Nets will blow through the East. Philly will give them problems. Outside of that, they'll blow through the East, and we will get a great NBA Finals in 2021, sometime in mid to late July. So can't wait for it. And with that, that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you guys so much for watching on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. If you were listening to the podcast episode of this, we appreciate it. You were listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Check out the interview we had with Dr. John Deloney on mental health. It's a great episode. I encourage all of y'all to check it out. So hope everybody has a great weekend. Please continue to stay safe. God bless you all. Peace out.